Hi, I'm Doris Epstein. Welcome to MENSCHlife TV. In Canada, we have had an announcement by the United Church of Canada that they are considering a boycott of all goods made in the West Bank by the settlers and including East Jerusalem. But 9 Canadian senators who are also members of the United Church have denounced this proposal. They're calling it one-sided, totally unfair, depicting Israel as guilty and the Palestinians as innocent victims. We're going to be talking to one of those senators, Senator Nancy Ruth, a little bit later. But first, welcome Eric Stein, the director of Ashkenaz, the North American's largest global festival of Israeli and Jewish and all sorts of Jewish, all shades of Jewish culture. It's every 2 years, right? And it's happening the last weekend in August.
That's right. Yeah, Labor Day weekend. Yeah.
At Harbourfront, you're taking over all of Harbourfront.
That's correct. Yeah.
And what are you anticipating this year? Who are you bringing in?
Well, we've got more artists than I could possibly name in 5 minutes. We've got about 80 acts or so, over 200 individual artists. We've got artists joining us from over a dozen countries on 6 continents. This is for sure the most diverse, eclectic, and global Ashkenaz festival that we've ever had.
Well, people are under the impression when you say Ashkenaz that it's totally in Yiddish.
That's correct. Yeah, I mean, I think that the festival was founded 17 years ago, and it originally emerged out of an international revival of klezmer music and Yiddish culture. And we continue to be very deeply committed to those things, but over the years we've also broadened our mandate and what we present. And this year's festival really reflects that. We're really, the overall general theme of the festival is global Jewish culture.
And I have the flyer of I won't go into it now because I can't find it, but I was just astonished looking at it. You've got Bukharan, you've got Israeli, you've got Swiss, and Ugandan. It's hard to think that we're a mix of so many ethnic varieties.
Mm-hmm. That's really what I think is being reflected in this year's programming, is how Jewish artists and Jewish culture in its diffusion across the world has so many incarnations and reflects Jewish creativity in so many different ways. And that's really what we're portraying in the programming this year.
2 years ago, I thought it just couldn't be any better.
Yeah, people always say that, which makes my job hard every 2 years when it comes around. How can we top what we just did? But I think we did pretty good this year. We'll see.
So let's start with the group called Yemen Blues.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about them first.
So they're one of our major headline acts. They're probably the most reputed world music act out of Israel these days. They formed a few years ago. We brought them to Toronto a year and a half ago for their North American debut. They played at a club in Toronto in the middle of the winter. And the show was an amazing success, and we knew we had to have them back for this festival. So they're going to be headlining our Sunday evening main stage at Harbourfront. That's a space.
And the dates, again, the dates.
That's September 2nd, Sunday, September 2nd. It's the Sunday of Labor Day weekend. And that stage holds about 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people. You just keep packing them in, and it's really going to be one of the highlights of the festival, and I think one of the highlights of the Toronto music calendar for this summer. The band is really interesting because they mix Yemenite and Middle Eastern influences with West African music and blues and jazz and funk, and it's just this incredible monster
And they're
ensemble.
Israeli based.
Yes.
Okay, let's have a look. Yemen Blues.
طلعت الجبل كان الجبل الكبير الجبل الكبير طلعت الجبل كان الجبل الكبير الجبل الكبير فوق الجبل الصغير قباله بالصرتم من اليمن فوق الجبل الصغير قباله بالصرتم من اليمن بتقول لي سلام كان دلم لامان مفصرت ولا شي افتح لنا أنت وحدك أنت وحدك فوق الجبل الصغير قباله بالصرت من عالي أمان يا لا ولا فوق الجبل الصغير قباله بالصرت من عالي أمان بتقول لي سلام كان دلم لا مان مفصرت ولا شي
Yemen Blues. If that's a sample, I can't wait to see what else you've got. And this will be a sampling of Ashkenaz. We're going to get to see many of the different acts that you have brought in internationally as well as locally. Mm-hmm. How did you get into this? You grew up in a non-Yiddish speaking, non-Hebrew speaking Canadian white bread household.
I don't know if I'd say white bread, but yeah, wasn't that connected
or bagels,
to
Lux and bagels.
Yeah. I mean, other than the influence of my grandparents, who were Yiddish-speaking Polish Jews, didn't have a lot of connection to Jewish culture and Jewish identity and Yiddish identity. But I got to it through music. As a musician, I discovered klezmer music and Yiddish music about 15 years ago. And it just became something that I sort of focused my creative energy on and really delved into.
And you have your own orchestra, Beyond the Pale.
That's right.
Which I hope we'll get to see. We'll be back in a minute with more from Ashkenaz. Eric Stein, Director of Ashkenaz, and more about Ashkenaz. This year, one of the highlights is not going to be music. It's going to be a play. Tell us about it. The Corpse Bride?
That's right. It's a production by a Toronto theater company called Theater Panic. I saw a workshop production of this show 2 years ago, and I fell in love with it, and I thought it was just the absolute perfect fit for Ashkenaz. We haven't done a major theater production at the Ashkenaz Festival since 2006, and so I thought it was kind of high time to bring that back to the festival. And it's a really amazing show based on Yiddish folklore from Eastern Europe, the Corpse Bride tale, which is fairly well known.
Is it something to do with the Dybbuk?
Similar. It's it touches on the supernatural and those kind of superstitions and folklores of Eastern Europe. And the play itself, from a aesthetic standpoint, is they call it movement theater. So there aren't many words spoken in the play. It's all played out in movement and sort of pseudo-dance type structures. And there's great music that's really, really moody and sets a great tone for the whole production. And I think it's going to be an amazing
So let's
highlight.
have a sample right now. That's a tantalizing look. I can't wait to see this. It's so powerful. It reminds me of The Artist. No speech.
It's interesting you say that, because the producers, directors of the show actually have that kind of aesthetic in mind. They talk about it as being referential to silent film and the gestures that are associated with Yiddish movement and dance. So, yeah.
Do you have other non-musical productions as well as this?
Yeah, we have a full slate of literature and talk sessions. We have a film program. We have interactive dance. We have a visual arts show.
What do you mean by interactive dance?
Yiddish dance, group Yiddish dance. So we have bands that would play
A
klezmer
Cheryl,
music. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Everybody gets into it.
Yeah, that's
it's not
been
a performance.
A component of the Ashkenaz Festival since the beginning. The community celebration and participation is a big part of the festival.
Well, let's go now to see Shai Ben-Tzur. Can you tell us a little bit about him?
Yeah, he's a really interesting artist who's going to be making his North American debut at our festival. He's an Israeli who lived in India for 12 years and immersed in Indian classical music and studying all those forms of indigenous Indian music, and in particular Sufi Qawwali music, which is a meditational, improvisational form. And he got so deep into it and then started to ask himself, well, how do I put myself into this as opposed to being an observer of this Indian music? And so he then started creating his own Qawwali music sung in Hebrew, which is an incredible mix of the two traditions.
So he fuses Israeli with Indian,
That's
with
right.
Sufi.
Yep. And his ensemble is made up of Israelis and Indians.
And Indians.
Yep.
Where is he based?
He's now back in Israel. He was living in India for a number of years. He's now back in Israel, but we've got 3 members of his ensemble are coming from New Delhi. He's coming from Israel, and then 2 other Israelis that are currently based in New York.
How do Indian Jews, native to Indian, figure in this in any way?
It's an interesting question, actually. And I'm not sure that I'm actually equipped to answer it, because I think it's more about Shai's relationship to his music. But in order to answer that question, and to something we do at the festival, is that we try to spread out the programming beyond just one discipline. So because we have Shai as one of our main highlights, we've also got a lecture session about the Jews of India being presented by a woman named Anne Sampson, who's a representative of Toronto's Indian Jewish community. So it provides context for people to take more than an entertainment experience out of a particular musical act and then delve a little deeper and put it into some sort of historical and sociological context.
So you're combining the performance with lectures, with
education, context, yeah.
That's new too, Eric, isn't it?
No, really. I mean, it's something that,
I mean,
this is the 3rd festival that I've directed, and that's been a principle of my programming approach, is to try to have the programming themes stretch out across different disciplines so that there's a broader base of information and enlightenment brought to the audience.
Well, enlightenment, because how many of us know about the Jews of India that were there for thousands of years?
Exactly.
So this music introduces a history that we would not normally be aware of.
I mean, the music itself, this particular music, because it's fusion and contemporary, it only introduces the idea of, let's think about Indians, about Jews creating in an Indian context, because I don't think this music would be considered authentically a representation of the Jewish community of India. The Indian Jewish community in India probably has its own indigenous traditions, whereas this is an invented tradition. But that's what we do as Jewish people. That's what we do as Jewish artists. We create an event, and then the inventions become traditions somewhere down the road.
And we're going to see another Jewish group from Uganda.
Mm-hmm.
So stay with us. Abuyudaya, Ugandan music, Jewish music.
Who knew, right? So this is really one of the acts that I'm most excited about having at the festival.
Okay, let's stop it for now, Max, and hear more about Abuyudaya.
Yeah, so there's a little-known Jewish community in Uganda. These are Jewish, a community that converted to Judaism about 100 years ago. There was originally at one point up to about 3,000 of them. During the Idi Amin years, they were decimated, and they went down to 200-300, and they were practicing in secret. And now since then, over the last 30 years, there's been a revival of the community. There's now about 1,000 to 1,200 of them. And they're very earnest about their practice of Judaism, and they have these beautiful, exquisite musical traditions that blend Ugandan and East African musical styles with
What makes
Jewish
them
texts.
Jewish? What makes it Jewish?
The music? Well, their identity is Jewish. They're singing psalms and Jewish songs that we would know, oh, say Shalom or something like that, songs that we would know in our own way. They've created their own musical versions of them to reflect their own practice of Judaism. But it's Jewish music nonetheless, because it's people who are practicing and living as Jews and have a musical tradition that reflects that.
All right, let's go to the more traditional Yiddish with Batya Schechter.
Yes. So Batya Schechter is an amazing artist from New York who's been at the festival before. She's best known for leading a band called Pharaoh's Daughter that we had at the festival in 2008. She was also at the festival in 2010 with a vocal quartet she has called MENSCHlife. And this year we're presenting a new project of hers in which she sets the poetry of the famous rabbi and civil rights activist Heschel to music. And Rabbi Heschel. So she creates really beautiful contemporary settings of Yiddish poetry to his words. It's quite beautiful.
All right, let's see it.
This is a prayer for protecting people in the house. It's a prayer that says no harm. A prayer that says no harm should come to anyone living in this house, and peace should be welcome in the house. And it's just called, in Hebrew, it's called Birkat Habayit, the blessing on the house.
So just to clarify, that's not one of the pieces from the Heschel project. I don't know.
It's someone she made, something she composed herself.
Yeah, I mean, it gives you a taste of what she's like as a solo artist. She's surrounded by a great 5-piece band for this program, and it's very contemporary music, very interesting music.
In Hebrew.
In Yiddish.
In Yiddish.
In Yiddish. That's why this clip is not necessarily the best representation of that show.
Oh, because normally she sings in Yiddish.
Well, this particular show, that the Heschel songs that she's doing are in Yiddish. That's correct.
Let's talk about so-called.
Sure.
Very intriguing name for a group.
Yeah, well, it's actually a man, an individual. He's been at the festival a number of times before. He's one of Canada's leading Jewish music fusion artists. He's from Montreal. His whole thing is basically creating hip-hop and funky dance music using Yiddish culture as a sort of as a resource. And so he does basically what hip-hop artists do, except he's drawing on Jewish influences.
All right.
That I'm blessed with a lot, so all I gotta say is work with what you got. They said my voice really wasn't made for rapping. Straight out the group home, it would never happen. As a teenager, I had my first child, and in all my photos, you never seen a smile. But now, I'm the best that ever did it. The greatest female rapper, and they all must admit it. To all the haters, I say thanks a lot, 'cause life can turn out really good if you work with what you got.
I know it's hard, but it takes some work to be
working with what you got.
If you got nothing, or even if you got it all.
Working with what you got.
I know it's hard, but it takes some work to be
working with what you got.
If you got nothing, or even if you got it all.
Working with what you got.
If you have an idea, just think it. If you have one eye, just blink it. If you have
So-called.
So that's one of his music videos. So it's we don't have too many artists that actually have music videos, but there's one.
I was so pleased to see Sharon and Bram headlined. They're an international children's favorite, but Lois is missing. What happened to Lois?
She retired from performing about 10 years ago. So the two of them, Sharon and Bram, continue on as a duo.
Let's see that. Sharon and Bram. From Sharon, Lois, and Bram, the children's music trio. And famous for this song especially. Who doesn't know this song? You grew up with it probably.
Of course,
huh?
yeah.
I love you. Skinnamarink-y dinky dink, skinnamarink-y doo. I love you. Sign up.
We're back with a taste of Ashkenaz, North America's largest global music and Jewish culture festival. Eric, you've got people coming from all over the world. Tell us more about who's coming and from what countries.
We have an artist coming from Australia named Freddie Meraki. We have an artist from Argentina called Leonard Mogalevsky that's been at the festival before. We've got an artist from Brazil. Another really exciting act we have is a group called Shush Makam, who are originally from Central Asia, Tajikistan and Azerbaijan. And they're Bukharan Jews who perform the Bukharan Jewish traditional music of that region, which includes Jewish influences as well as the influences of the local culture.
So let's have a look at Shush Magam.
Makam.
Shush Makam.
That's right. Yeah, there's a dance tradition that goes with this music. Yeah.
So are we going to see dance and music?
Yes, they dance on stage as part of the performance.
Where are they located?
They're now located in New York, Queens, but they're all originally from Central Asia.
I was listening for Russian, but I don't hear it.
It's not so much a Russian tradition as it is a Central Asian one. It reflects more of Persian culture and Eastern cultures than it is of Russia.
What is the history of Bukhara in a nutshell? Where do they?
You're asking the wrong
Where are they
guy.
living? where exactly is it located? Do you remember? Bukhara.
Central Asia.
Central Asia.
Yes. Yeah.
And
so these particular musicians come from Azerbaijan and Tajikistan.
so there are Jews living today in those countries?
I would guess
Or
not
did
too many,
they-
but I
did
think there
they
are
immigrate?
still Jews there, but I think that a lot have emigrated.
And their tradition is more Asian rather than Russian or Slavic.
I would say so. It sort of exists at the crossroads of Turkish, Persian, and Eastern influences.
Okay, and now a big contrast. The Lucidarum Ensemble.
Lucidarium.
Lucidarum.
They're an Italian-Swiss ensemble that specializes in early music. And in particular, they have done a whole program of Italian Jewish Renaissance era music. So it's sort of Baroque style Jewish folk music, essentially, from the Middle Ages.
And from what area? Italy, Switzerland?
Italy and Switzerland is where the musicians are from, and the music that they're presenting reflects the Jewish musical traditions of Italian Jews in the 15th century, 16th century era.
All right. Lucidarium, did I say it right?
Lucidarium.
Lucidarium. What a contrast. It sounds like Renaissance music, like
That's right.
like madrigals and
Exactly, except, they're going to be singing in Hebrew and Italian Judeo.
is it Ladino?
I think there is some Ladino in it. I'm not sure if there's some Yiddish in it. There may be a bit of Yiddish.
You featured Ladino previously.
Yeah, we have some a number of acts this year doing Ladino music as well. We're really trying to be a big tent and really reflect the whole global.
I'm trying to catch everything in
Yeah.
this limited time that
the only
we
way to
have,
catch
but-
it all is to come to the festival.
That too.
Yeah.
All right. Klezmerson.
Klezmerson, yeah. So this is a really interesting group that's making their Canadian debut. They're from Mexico. It's the first act we've ever had from Mexico at the festival. And their music reflects a fusion of Jewish music and klezmer music with Latin American influences and Mexican influences. They're a great, really interesting ensemble.
Let's see it.
I
Ashkenaz, the biggest North American festival of Jewish culture, with director Eric Stein. We've seen music from Uganda, from India, from Switzerland and Italy. How about local artists?
Excellent question. Ashkenaz has always maintained a really strong commitment to our local artists. And in fact, the festival's presence here in Toronto for the last 17 years, I think, has led to the development of a really thriving local scene for Jewish music and culture. And so, of course, we reflect that very strongly in the festival. In particular, we have Aaron Ben-Susan, who's a very well-known local cantor, worldwide known as a cantor. He's got a new project where he mixes his own Moroccan and liturgical influences with rock and pop kind of influences. So he's going to be debuting a new CD at the festival. That's going to be really interesting. There's also another ensemble called Ventanas, which is a local group that does Ladino and Sephardic music mixed with Spanish and Greek and Turkish. And they're a very interesting act, and they'll actually have a flamenco dancer with them in their performance. Then we have our Canadian Cabaret, where we focus only on Canadian artists. That's one of our late night sessions. And one of the other features of the late night program at Ashkenaz is these big party sessions where we have basically dance parties. And one of the bands that we're going to be featuring this year on our Sunday evening, September 2nd, is a local group called Lemon Bucket Orchestra, which is this 15-piece ensemble of completely crazed, mad, Balkan, Eastern European folk musicians whose philosophy is basically music should happen anywhere, anytime, anyhow. And on that note, we can show you a clip of them recently. They took a trip to Romania to study some music there. And while one of their plane was delayed in taking off, and they were sitting on the runway in the plane, as people always do, very bored in the plane waiting. And so these guys picked up their instruments and started playing in the plane, and it became this big viral hit. I think the video already has 300,000 or 400,000 hits on YouTube. So we should take a look at it because they're fun. But then we can also take a look at some other footage of them performing live.
Lemon Bucket. I can't sit still.
Right. Well, wait till you see the whole band on stage. That's really what their whole thing is, just really getting the party going. And so when you see them with their whole 15-piece ensemble, this will be one of the biggest parties of the festival for sure.
Who else that perhaps you haven't mentioned? Your own group, Beyond the Pale.
Yes, we're coming back to the festival for the first time since 2008. I took a break from playing at the festival last time, but so we're coming back this year. And I mean, one of the casualties of my work with the festival is I don't get to put as much energy into my own musical projects as I might like. But Beyond the Pale, we're approaching our 15th anniversary as a band, and we'll be putting out a new CD next year in honor of that. And so we'll be debuting some of that music at the festival this year.
Who is involved today in? I see mostly young people. I don't see older people that you would imagine would be most of the audience.
You're talking about the artists or the audience?
The artists and the audience.
I think it's a mix on both sides. Certainly on the artistic side, there are a lot of young artists that are finding this music and culture and treating it as raw material for their own expression.
It's almost a renaissance, would you say?
Yeah, I'd say it's beyond renaissance. I think it was a revival phenomenon 10, 20 years ago. It's now something that's just a very vibrant field for creation that people are drawn to. And audience-wise, our audience is a mix. We have people that are toddlers to 80s and 90s, and that's one of the things that's really beautiful about the festival, to see people of all ages and backgrounds celebrating together. Half of our audience isn't even Jewish.
Thank you, Eric Stein. I can't wait. Ashkenaz, do come, don't miss it. The United Church of Canada is proposing next month to decide on a boycott of all Israeli goods produced in all the settlements, including Judea and Samaria and East Jerusalem. However, a group of senators, 9, have protested this, have condemned this proposal, and said that it is one-sided, that Israel is being depicted as the guilty one and the Palestinians as innocent victims. We're going to be talking to one of those 9 senators, Senator Nancy Ruth. Good morning, Senator Nancy Ruth. Thank you very much for agreeing for this interview, this very important interview. So the proposal will be voted on next month, whether indeed to make a boycott of all Israeli settlements, including East Jerusalem, and the goods they produce. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
How did this come about? This was 3 years in the making. A working group took it on themselves to come up with this proposal. Can you give us some insights into how this was initiated and what it's about?
Since the 1960s, there's always been a group within the United Church that has raised up for the church the concerns of the Palestinians. And General Council to General Council, from time to time, they issue proposals that they wish the whole church to accept. What happened at the last General Council, about 3 years ago, is there was quite a floor controversy around a resolution on re-Palestine and the territories. So the decision was made that there should be a working group to study the issue, and there has been this working group, and this working group, which was authorized by the United Church General Council, has come up with this proposal to boycott goods coming out of the territories.
But you and 8 other senators who are United Church members, as well as senators in the Canadian Senate, have condemned this proposal.
We have suggested that it would be better if it did not go forward. We believe that it will hurt Canada-Israel relations, that the Jewish community within Canada will not understand criticism around the territories without it being criticism around the acts of Israel. So we're concerned about that because the government of Canada is very pro-Israel at this time, and we do not believe this resolution will further those relationships internationally or within Canada itself.
I find it interesting and rather strange that at a time when Christians around the world in Islam countries are being severely persecuted, that the United Church decides to focus on Israel.
The United Church doesn't just focus on Israel, it focuses on many countries, but one of the issues around Israel
and Palestine is that the United Church of Canada sends funds and supports work in that country, whereas in Iran we don't. It's not that we don't comment about Iran, but we do so at a different level around those countries in which we financially support work. Yes?
Attempts to boycott those countries?
I don't know enough to answer that question.
To your knowledge, you don't know if they are boycotting those countries that persecute Christians.
I am not aware, for instance, of any boycott of Egypt at this time, but it was suggested by the United Church. But they're very concerned about the persecution of Coptic and other Christians in Egypt, for sure.
But no boycotts. But can you tell me what your opinion is of, they would be considered a charity, a non-profit organization with a charitable number. Is it appropriate for the United Church or any religious institution to be making political comments like this?
In my opinion, absolutely. Both you and I carry the tradition of the prophets, and they certainly wore sackcloth and ashes from time to time and spoke against governments, and so our religious groups continue to do so. And it's very much the role of religion whatever religion to do that, and in my opinion, it is a legitimate charitable activity.
How many...
Technology. It's part of doing God's will to speak out against that which is wrong and corrupt.
How many people would you say this is a reflection of the thousands and thousands of United Church members across the country to boycott Israeli settlement goods?
No, I don't think it is. I suspect the resolution will be defeated at the General Council. One never knows until the vote's called.
But have you heard...
What I can say is that for, 50 years, there has been a contingent within the United Church who has always been concerned about the rights of Palestinians. And part of their push in another decade to, assist issues around Palestine.
So would you say that it reflects generally the membership of the United Church, or is it a minority?
I think it's a minority.
People have...
The thing I've heard, and I've had many, many emails since this letter was published at the end of June, there are many people on both sides, but there are just as many opposed to it as there are for it.
And what are they saying? What is the membership saying? The emails that you've got, what are they saying?
Some of them condemn me, and some of them support me. This is, better than I how controversial this issue is, and there are very strong opinions on both sides.
Well, I congratulate you for taking a stand, you and the other 8 senators, to come together, because some of them are liberal and you are a conservative. I congratulate you on taking this stand and publicly stating where you stand on this issue, that it is one-sided and unjust. And I thank you very much for your time today. Senator Ruth of the Conservative Party, and taking a stand.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye.